Hi, this is the Democratic Alliance Labour Report, Friday the 25th of November 2022. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Be good if you can share this. We got a couple of interesting things that I want to speak to you about. Obviously, it's the taxi strike and how it affected Labour, in particular in Cape Town. But we have rumours that there'll be taxi strikes across the country, so it's something we must discuss. And then I wanted to obviously talk about government being held to ransom by COSATU and SAFTU and the civil servants. It's a very important subject. It is something that we're facing in the near future. They have threatened, and I suspect during the course of next week, we're going to have another important stay away from the civil servants. So thank you for tuning in. As I said, it's Friday the 25th of November 2022. I'm Michael Bagram. I'm the Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. Now, just to preface all of this, the Democratic Alliance, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, would always try and avert strikes. We would invoke the legislation, we would bring in the CCMA commissioners, we'd negotiate properly, we wouldn't unilaterally implement increases, we would not be there to irritate the trade unions. The Democratic Alliance very strongly believes in working properly with the trade union movement, with the umbrella bodies, and coming to proper agreements instead of fisticuffs. Unfortunately, the ANC is not of the same ilk. The ANC is basically very lazy. They wait until there's a strike, they wait until there's a nightmare, and only then do they then try and start negotiating their way out, but they cause the trouble themselves. Now, let's have a look at that tripartite alliance and why this alliance is now falling apart and why the COSATU and SAFTU are holding government to ransom. And that's what it is. They're holding government to ransom, and we as a country are going to suffer. And it's something that the Democratic Alliance would have avoided almost at any cost. We don't look for strikes, we don't look for fights. We look to be fair and square in the circumstances of each wage dispute. Now, that tripartite alliance was entered into between the ANC, the Communist Party, and COSATU in 1994. There was a good reason for it at the time, although there were people that warned them against an alliance. Very difficult for a trade union and the biggest employer body in the country, the government, trying to get into an alliance, because how do you negotiate at arm's length when you are in an alliance together? And it hasn't worked. At the time, the glue of that alliance was to somehow gain some hegemonic control of South Africa, which they did. They've effectively, from 1996, 2 years after the alliance, they started with the cadre development, and we then saw almost every single position in SOEs, in government, in many big companies as well, where people were put in as cadre deployment because they were members of the alliance, because they had card-carrying members of the ANC or the Communist Party, and people weren't able to perform their duties. They were there to collect the salary. And we saw that very, very clearly over the last 10 years, but it started already in 96, where people wanted to have that hegemonic control over South Africa. And to a large degree, it was going unnoticed right up until the early 2000s, 2001, 2002. But then the Democratic Alliance picked up that this was happening, that people were being appointed because of their membership of the ANC or because of the alliance membership. And we noticed in the Democratic Alliance, not me, but my forebears were noticing how the economy was being destroyed by people placed in jobs when they couldn't actually do the job. The DA has always stood for the concept of fit for purpose. In other words, you appoint someone who is able to do the job, able to perform. There was productivity, and we're seeing that productivity and performance coming out of the Western Province, and in particular the city of Cape Town, where the mayor is doing an absolutely sterling job. It's absolutely fantastic. It is good, I must admit, to sit under the DA control where I sit in Cape Town, where at least I get service, I get productivity, and we're seeing things starting to happen. So well done to the Western Province government, the DA-led Western Province government, and in particular to the DA-led Cape Municipality and the City Council of Cape Town, who are appointing people who are fit for purpose. Yes, it takes a lot of time. Yes, you have to start working your way through, and Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis is doing that. I don't think he ever sleeps, but he's doing that. So we have this alliance between the comrades who were given jobs, and the civil service then grew, it burgeoned. And today it's about 4 times the size of what it should be. Just think this one through. So you've got it 4 times the size of what it should be. And of course, as the economy shrinks and jobs become more scarce, you have to keep putting more and more comrades into jobs, which is ridiculous. So what is happening, of course, is that COSATU, pushing for more and more wages, pushing for more and more jobs, is holding government to ransom, because government needs their votes. We've got an election coming up in 18 months' time. That election is a crucial one. The ANC has dropped to about 45%. All the research is showing that it's about 45%, which means that the opposition can form alliances and take control. Now, the DA already controls municipalities and some local governments. It's interesting because wherever the DA goes in, they start creating jobs and they start making sure that we have some honesty, at least, and productivity. Now, the civil service being 3 or 4 times as big as what it was in '94, we're noticing that not only is it as big, but they overpaid. And of course, the overpayment comes from the wage negotiations, because every time there are wage negotiations, the trade unions, through COSATU and SAFTU now, are saying, you either pay or we don't vote for you. So you can see how it's easy to keep government to ransom. This was warned way back when, in the 80s, when the initial discussions were being held between the ANC and the trade union movement at the time. There's some very interesting articles and books on this. If anyone's interested, I can refer you to it. But those interesting articles and books were saying this is going to happen. A time will come to pass when, in fact, the biggest employer in the country, which is government, and the biggest trade union umbrella bodies have to have a fallout. And we're seeing that fallout now, because the civil service is top-heavy, it's overpaid, unproductive, and to a large degree, home of literally thousands of comrades who have been appointed purely because of their party membership. These civil servants are used to getting double-digit increases. They can't now. The government doesn't have the money. So even though it's being held to ransom, you've got to be able to raise the money somewhere. I see our president, Old Squirrel, is in fact in England going to beg for some money. But of course, I think the international community fully understand that it's like pouring water into a colander. That money never sticks and it's never used for the particular purpose in which it's given. It's a real problem. And so to go back to where we are, in that the Democratic Alliance has strongly suggested that we go back to the knitting. We look at the proper structure of the Labour Relations Act. We bring in the CCMA, their most important and their most senior commissioners, get the civil service to sit around the table. I think they want to. Get them to understand where government stands at the moment. And if it was a DA government, look, hopefully we will have soon, that DA government would avoid the strike. We'd have a negotiation, we'd get early settlements, and we'd work together, hand in glove, with the trade union movement. So thank you for listening to me. It's Michael Bagram, Labour spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. It's Friday, the 25th of November, 2022. Thank you.